And we are back, and we just finished watching. Wait a minute. And we are back, and we just finished watching 2022's Men, rated R with a runtime of 1 hour and 40 minutes. This was on the Showtime app.
Yeah.
And is written and directed by Alex Garland.
What the hell was that?
I don't know. Okay, so the story starts where Harper, played by the lovely Jessie Buckley, is going to a English cottage to get away from, I guess, and just to regroup after the death/suicide of her husband, James.
Yeah.
And in this little cottage, she encounters Geoffrey, played by Rory Kinnear, who's, I guess, the owner of the little house.
He's like the owner or the caretaker. And
he says he lives up the block.
He lives up the block, and it's a tiny little town. It's got like a little pub and a church and lots of forests around and countryside. And it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a very, you never see anybody out and about, and it's supposed to be just very relaxing. And I
would say for the most part of this movie, the tension and the suspense were crazy, because at one point I was ready to tap out.
Yeah, I mean, it did a great job with that.
It's just the last half hour that became...
And there's weirdness going on because, I mean, it's even in the trailer, but everybody looks like...
Rory Kinnear.
Even like a little boy looks like... It's creepy as hell that he like CG'd his face onto a little boy's body.
Yeah.
But all of them look like the vicar, the policeman.
Was that CG as outlandish as the Twilight CG?
Yes. Although, I mean, they were putting that face on a baby.
So.
Good God.
We know way too much about that movie, and we haven't really seen it.
We've never really seen it, but we've seen enough of it to realize that is
it's not good.
Insanity. Yeah.
America. Seriously.
Why did you make that so popular?
Really?
What's wrong with you? Well, that was a worldwide phenomenon. The world's to blame for Twilight. Good Lord. Anyway, back to Men. And it starts out, she goes walking through the countryside. She seems to be
goes down a tunnel she shouldn't be going down.
Starts playing with echoes and tunnels, and suddenly it's just weirdness happens. She's being followed. There's a nude guy walking around. He just shows up at the house. The police come. The policeman looks just like him. No, but that's the thing. That was one of the things that was strange. Did she notice that they all look the same? Because she never registered that.
It seemed like it never registered to her.
Yeah, she never mentioned it or anything. It was just sort of like she's going with the flow.
I sometimes, it's funny that you said that, because at one point I wondered, is this all in her head?
I'm wondering, maybe, because there was did it have something to do with those spore pollens flying around? Because it was there when she was walking through the woods, and then there was that really bizarre scene with the nude guy where he blows them at her.
And one of them goes in her mouth.
And they also showed one going into that deer's eye socket in slow motion. So maybe there was some sort of weird pollen thing. I'm sure there definitely was some kind of weird supernatural thing going on, because the church had that green man face.
Yeah, which isn't Christian.
No, not Christian at all. And then on the other side of the was it an altar? There was just that
it
that
looked
weird
like a baptismal font.
Oh, is that what it was supposed to be? There was just that weird little gargoyle spreading its labia. It was just.
Yeah, this movie was nuts.
There's a lot of that.
What do you think it meant?
I don't know. I have no freaking idea. It was baffling. I thought maybe there was it would turn out to be a hallucination or a cult or something, and then that ending was
wild.
What the hell is going on? Is she in danger? Is she fine with it? Why did Rory steal her car?
I don't know.
He just went joy. He just give me that car. He just drives off, and then he comes back
to murder her.
Was he going to try and murder her?
I don't know. It felt like it.
it
felt like he was going to run her over.
It didn't end with that. It suddenly it's just like a pregnant man after pregnant man after pregnant man.
I don't know.
And like I kind of saw where it was going a little bit when you saw the ankle break, because that was like pretty jarring from the suicide. So I was like, oh, maybe that's gonna end up being that.
James.
But even still, that doesn't make it any clearer.
And then the end
And then they're just
scene,
like, hey, let's have a sit on the couch, and
then they're just talking like nothing.
Yeah. And then at the end, she's just sitting outside, and her friend shows up, and she's just like, oh yeah, hey.
But
big,
the friend
big
is pregnant.
Smile. Yeah.
Which
was that important? I don't know what the hell was going on.
I'm assuming it was.
I don't know. This was just baffling.
I mean, I didn't hate it.
The ending makes me not like it just because it was so goddamn baffling. It really was. It was a spectacle to see. Gross. Just so damn gross.
Is that what you think of the miracle of life?
That was not the miracle of life. Trust me, it didn't look like that. I know you had a lot of drugs in you when you gave birth, but it did not look like that. Like after like the second one, they weren't even coming out of the birth canal.
No, they were coming out of other weird places. So, I mean, the first and second acts of this were wild.
Yeah, very tense. You didn't know what you didn't know what was going on, but it was still like you felt like it was going to go to some sort of
crazy payoff.
I guess rational payoff where you have some kind of explanation as to what the hell is going on. Maybe this is like the type of film where you got to like research or something. Figure out like ancient folklore from old Britannia, so you understand what the hell is happening. Something with rebirth, and I don't know. I mean, I wasn't bored. No. That's for damn sure.
No,
and like you said, the first two parts of the film were wild and tense, and you
really good, like really good horror,
really good. And then the second,
and the last half hour, it just became a different film, right?
I don't think it became a different film. It just went in a direction that, to me, I could not make heads or tails of. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of film nerds out there who are just like, oh, yeah, it means this, Ouroboros, or some nonsense. And for the average viewer, they're going to look at that and just be like,
what the F?
What the fuck did I just watch?
Obviously, there's commentary here, right? There's commentary about different things, like the vicar, and that whole like really uncomfortable exchange in the church garden.
Yeah.
And then in the house where he's asking her that question, which I found very jarring.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because she sort of has, I don't know in what moment she has the epiphany, but she has an epiphany that she goes from being scared to not being scared. By the end of her interactions with the men, it doesn't seem fearful anymore.
No, but that was like another thing because that happened at various points where like suddenly she's like calm and undisturbed by it, and then suddenly she's scared again. And then calm and then disturbed by it. And then suddenly she's scared again. And then at the end, she's just whatever. And like, what the hell? When she actually decides to do the rational thing, get in her car and get the hell out of there, why did they show her getting her keys 3 different ways in 3 different states of mind?
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah.
I mean, I may have been 4 or 5, actually. I didn't understand that at all. I really just did not understand what the hell was going on. It was baffling. Up until
the last half hour, did you understand everything that was going on?
Not really, but I sort of felt like
it was easier
it was heading towards something that like it like all the pieces looked like they were going to come together into some sort of, I guess, like complete picture that I would understand. But it didn't. It's like all the pieces were there, and then suddenly they're just like crammed them together in a way that I had no idea that they would be put together. And the end result just didn't make a lick of sense to me at all. It's like, hey, we're making a cake, and then suddenly they open up the oven and they pull out like a puppy, and I'm like, what the hell just happened? How did you do that? Except it wasn't a puppy; it was a gross chain of men giving birth to themselves.
I feel like up until the last 30, 35 minutes, it was good. I feel like the men represented different things. I guess obviously the vicar, religion. Geoffrey?
Was Geoffrey the caretaker?
The landlord. Like he represented sort of the nice guy. The two weird guys at the bar were sort of like the guys that you sort of encounter at places like that give you like the creeps.
Mm-hmm. What about the foul-mouthed little kid?
Where these men come from, like that's like the beginning. Because remember the vicar says, what does he say about him? That he's really troubled or something?
Yeah.
So I guess you're explaining why these men turn out the way they do. And it's because of something in the past. And I guess the same correlation could be made with James. At one point, she loved James. They were married. Mm-hmm. But the relationship fractured in such a way that she was going to divorce him. And then he emotionally and mentally manipulates her. But she seems to have had enough at this point.
Well, after he belted her, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was definitely... Because she even says to the vicar that was something he had never done before. Yeah. And she was so angry after.
Yeah, like she didn't care if he killed himself.
Right.
I don't know. I kind of think, I guess she generated them all in her mind. Mm-hmm. And like you said, they each represented something I'm guessing something to do with her relationship with her husband. Mm-hmm. Like maybe they were all aspects of his personality at some point. Mm-hmm. But then again, there were all those other ones. The bartender, the cop. There were several guys at the bar.
There were. But I think like the bartender you only see at the bar, and she didn't really interact with him. So he was just a guy. I mean, this whole village was Rory Kinnear, right? But
was it really though?
So that's what I was going to say. I wonder if this was all in her head. And I agree with you. I don't think that she made a distinction. Like I feel like she thought that all these guys were individually singular, right?
Yeah, because she never addresses the fact that and it's not like as though it was subtle.
No, it was very obvious,
completely obvious. Yeah, it was. They all looked exactly the same. A couple of hairstyles, maybe some big teeth, and clothes
difference. But other than that, yeah, like even the little boy had adult Rory Kinnear's face.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. It was just baffling.
But it wasn't bad.
I would say it's
Ex Machina.
I would say it's something to see. Like Ex Machina was outstanding. It was great. It was one of the best films of that year, I believe. Mm-hmm. This, I could see why people didn't flock to this one. This one was just...
What could have made it better?
Some sort of... I need the explanation fed to me, because this just completely went over my head.
So I think up until what part was I tapping out at?
When she was in the kitchen and the bird came through the window. But you don't know that it's a bird. Or well, maybe it wasn't even a bird. Who the hell knows what was going on?
I think at that point.
But you were tapping because it was just so suspenseful. And you thought, oh my God, it's finally we're going to get to the meaty conclusion to this mystery.
Yeah.
And right after that, it was just, all right, something weird is going on, but it doesn't make a goddamn lick of sense to me.
So I feel like the first two acts of it were fine.
Yeah, it was very suspenseful, mysterious,
and scary and weird,
and like exactly what you'd think of when you're going through these things. Like I was thinking, this makes me think of like Hereditary or Midsommar or something, like an Ari Aster movie.
Yes.
But then it was just like, what is happening?
So I think instead of trying to be like philosophical or whatever, they should have just leaned into the horror, right?
Give me some kind of explanation of what exactly was occurring. I guess, I mean, some people I like it too when some things are left kind of ambiguous. This was just too much. There was nothing to hold on to at the end. You're just sort of like spiraling into this just
the ether,
complete insanity that just doesn't make any sense. It's sort of like, remember we watched that stop motion film Mad God? Visually interesting to look at, but just what the hell was that?
Yeah.
It just you're out of control. No narrative makes any kind of sense. That's what happened here. I believe we were on like a narrative course, and then suddenly you're just flying off a cliff into the ether, and it's just like, figure it out for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like for as good and as suspenseful and as tense as the first two parts of it were, the last part was sort of a disservice to the entirety of the story, because it did, to me at least, it felt like a different movie. It took a different turn. It felt different. It felt like it was a completely different story at that point, what was happening at the end. And I think if they had just leaned heavily into the horror, I mean, they had the elements of like paganism, I guess, in that church, right?
Yeah.
It could have been that there was like some supernatural being that controlled this town. I mean, she goes on that walk earlier in the film, and there's like, it felt like it was like an abandoned area.
Yeah,
when
like
you first see the naked man.
Yeah, when she climbs out of the ravine, she passes by that.
Right, it was like a ghost town.
Ghost town, yeah.
Right, so like it could have been like this crazy spirit that lived in that area that made everyone crazy.
I don't know. I really don't. Like I was saying with like the ambiguous, where you have questions, like in Ex Machina, you have questions. Was she just completely manipulating him? Was I forgot what the main scientist's name was, but was he right? What you ask these questions, and if you think about it, you come up with your own conclusions. I don't know. I don't even know what questions to ask.
I guess, I mean, are we spoiling this? I mean, this is fairly new, right? I guess it just came out last year.
I mean, the only thing. We said that like everybody in the town is Rory, whatever his name is, and that it's extremely weird and there's paganism, I guess, involved, or maybe it's just she's hallucinating, or I don't know. Was the caretaker real? Was any of this real? It must have been real. The house was in good shape. I don't know. What do you give this thing? Let's just wrap this up.
I feel like I'm still processing this film viewing experience. Like I said, I mean, up until the last half hour or so, it was very tense. It was very suspenseful. I felt so much dread to the point where I turned to you at several points and was like, I don't know if I can continue because I feel like I'm going to throw up. Mm-hmm. It felt like that kind of tension. And here's this woman by herself trying to get the pieces of her life back together and get over this loss. Because even if she was divorcing him, at the end of the day, her husband died / killed himself. Because we don't know if he did one or the other, right?
Yeah, they leave that up to a bit of ambiguousness, because she says she doesn't know if he was trying to climb down from this upstairs apartment or if he
just jumped, right?
We don't know.
So I thought that was interesting when they flash back to her having conversations with her husband on that day, where he basically seems to imply that I'm going to kill myself and it's going to be your fault. And this is something that you have to live with for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. Which is a shit thing to do to another human being.
Yeah.
But I think that this man didn't care, right? He was more interested in how he was going to control the situation, how he was going to get her to not divorce him, how he was going to tether her to him. So he was pulling out all the stops, right? And in a moment of passion and rage, he strikes her, which is something he had never done, which she found jarring. But she finds the strength to fight back and is basically, like you said before, I don't give a fuck what you do. You want to go kill yourself? Have at it. Mm-hmm. And I won't feel bad about it. And I think in that moment, he realized he couldn't control her. Because I think in a lot of these abusive relationships, it's obviously about power and control, right? Mm-hmm. And she seems to have told the line, and then something happened that broke that. And she now was going to fight for herself. And she was putting herself first, and she was telling him, not asking him, she was telling him that they were going to get a divorce. So I think in that respect, these other characters that she's created Or maybe they are part of the natural world, but in her mind, again, she's still in the process of grieving. So things probably aren't as they seem. And I think that this whole vacation takes a different turn because kind of tied to the conversation that she's having with the vicar, she feels guilt because she wonders if something she could have said or done something differently that would have changed the outcome of what transpired. So, and then you have the vicar basically maybe giving voice to the stuff in her head, like, oh, but why didn't you give him a chance to apologize? Mm-hmm. And then that makes her angry because somebody is saying that to her. But I felt like this was probably something in her head because I felt like everything that he was saying to her was stuff that she agreed with. So I'm assuming that this is all stuff that she internalized and was thinking about.
And we don't even know if this guy's real.
And I think he represented something either in her psyche or her subconscious that was sort of like the mirror held up, forcing her to deal with stuff, right? And I think that all of the Rory Kinnears represented something like that. And then at the end, you kind of see James again. And he says something interesting to her. And her response to it is also interesting, if you remember.
I don't even remember.
He says something to her, and she's basically like, yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? Kind of. He asks for something of her. Do you remember what it was? I don't want to give too much of it away.
No, I don't remember. Oh, well, that's right.
And then she makes that comment, like, that's the thing. And interestingly enough, she never looks at him, right? And that's another thing that he says, look at me. She doesn't look at him, and then she's playing with the blade of the axe. Mm-hmm. At that point, I thought she was just going to chop him up. Away. Yeah.
I kind of thought that too, but they
don't show anything. Yeah. And she's not any bloodier when the friend shows up than she was the previous night. So I also thought it was interesting that Riley is pregnant.
The friend?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I found that very interesting. I mean, she for the most part, she has conversations through FaceTime with the friend, but it's always obviously from the chest up. So you don't really know what's going on. And you don't know anything about Riley. Is she married? Is she not married? Whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of things in this movie that you could look into and analyze.
I wonder if Alex Garland's whole thing was, well, we'll let the viewer decide. We're just going to make this trippy kind of
I feel
movie.
I feel like that's what was going on here, and normally that's fine for me, but this was a bit too much.
Again, I think if they had tonally kept the movie one thing, like I said, up until the last 35 minutes of this film, I felt like, to me, the last 35 minutes of this film felt like a completely different story. Like we went from a horror story to a study on men. I don't know. I mean, like, I don't even know how to describe it. It was a completely different film in the last half hour.
Yeah, I guess.
I think that there's like all this symbolism and stuff that you could read into or whatever, but I think that ultimately it's not my favorite Garland movie. I am pleased that I saw it. Mm-hmm. It was on my list to watch. It's pretty. Jessie Buckley is amazing in it. She does a really, really good job. I felt scared for her. I felt happy for her when she's in the tunnel and she's getting joy from her little music experiment there. Mm-hmm. And I was rooting for her because I wanted her to find solace and peace. And ultimately, does she?
She smiles at the end.
She does smile at the end. So did she put all of that other stuff behind her?
Maybe.
That's the question. 1 to 10, what would you give this?
I'd probably give it a 4.
Really?
I just didn't like it.
Wow. I don't think it's a 4, but I'm going to give this an 8. I think
that means you really, really liked it.
I enjoyed it. I think the horror part of this was really well done.
No, that was really well done, but I just feel like that end, I feel like I invested my time and I was really kind of into it. The performances were good, but then the end just left me like, what the hell am I seeing? What am I watching? And it just...
Well, I think
it was too damn confusing at the end and not satisfying. And at the end of the day, I want I want to be satisfied when I'm finished watching the movie. I want to feel like even if it's one of the type of film that leaves certain questions unanswered and certain things ambiguous, I want to enjoy thinking about those things. Mm-hmm. This I'm not enjoying it. So overall, I am dissatisfied with this movie. If I were to just judge it on the way it looked, I'd give it a higher score. If I were to just judge it on the performances, I'd give it a higher score. But the fact that it failed to do what a movie, in my mind, must do, which is entertain and satisfy me by telling a coherent story, that failed. And that's why I'm giving it a 4.
Okay, fair enough. I think that, again, it's not my favorite Alex Garland movie, but I think that the productions on it were really good. The actors were all really, really good. And it's kind of interesting because it's not a big ensemble cast.
No, there's like 4 or 5 actors in it.
Yeah.
There's main actress. There's the main actor. There's the female cop. The husband. And the best friend, right?
The best friend, right? So 5 people, yeah. It's not a big production. The locales are really beautiful. The set design, the costuming, all of that. The soundtrack is pretty interesting. There's some interesting choices there. The horror portion of this story worked really, really well. Mm-hmm. I would have liked them to continue in that vein and maybe close it out that way. If you look at the last half hour, to me at least, again, it's a different movie. And
it's almost like a Cronenberg movie at the end.
Kind of, yeah. But I think that it's interesting and it raises a lot of questions and commentary because you can look at it from so many multiple kind of viewpoints. Who were these guys? Were they real? Were they representative of stuff in our head?
Was there more than one, or was it all the same thing?
Right. Who was the original naked man, right? Like, what did he represent? What was that town?
Yeah,
what was the symbols
he's the only one who pretty much he's the only one who had like a scene by himself. Mm-hmm. Without anybody else, without the main female protagonist.
Right. The little boy, like what was his story? The vicar was wild. So that's why I thought it was going to be more of a supernatural bent, like kind of thing. But and then the actual ending of the film when the friend comes, like what did all of that mean, kind of thing. So I think it was I liked it. I didn't hate it. I totally agree with you. Parts of it were very confusing and just very ambiguous. And you don't want that. You want to be able to sort of sort out the story and wrap things up. But I think this was interesting in a way that the story was told, because again, I feel like the first part of it is a completely different film, and then you get the latter portion of it where it becomes something else. Mm-hmm. All right, so that's it from us, and we will bid you. Again, this is playing on the Showtime app.
Yeah, we watched it on the
Showtime app. Again, this is called Men from 2022, written and directed by Alex Garland. It is rated R for some violence and nudity, I guess. Gore.
Nudity and, yeah.
Yeah. And
body horror.
And body horror, yes. And it clocks in at 1 hour and 40 minutes. I think, yeah, that's a really good explanation. The end is very Cronenberg-esque. Mm-hmm. Way better than that. What was the movie we saw?
Crimes of Tomorrow or Crimes of the Future. Or
something like that. Oh, that was awful.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell was
going on. I would rather watch this again than that.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't even make it through that.
Yeah.
The acting everybody was just
terrible. How does he get people to keep continuing to want to be in his films? He's like Robert Rodriguez at this point.
Yeah, I don't know. He had his day.
He did. All right, that's it from us, and we will bid you all a
good night.
Good night.